Okay, so October, November 2017. Question 1. Average monthly income of households in a certain town increases from 2,000 to 2,500. As a result, the quantity demanded of white bread increases from 1,000 to 1,100. Quantity demanded of brown bread decreases from 2,000 to 1,900. And KFC increases from 300 to 500 pieces per day. Use the arc elasticity formula to calculate income elasticity of demand. All right. So again, you should know your arc elasticity formula. And again, it looks exactly the same. The only difference is we're going to use income instead of price. Okay, so it's still your EP is equal to Q2 minus Q1 divided by Q2 plus Q1 all over Y2. Now the difference here, Y is income rather than price, minus Y1 divided by Y2 plus Y1. All right, so start with whichever one you want, white bread. So when income increases from 2,000 to 2,500, quantity demanded of white bread increases from 1,000 to 1,100. So 1,100 minus 1,000 divided by 1,100 plus 1,000, so that's 2,100, all over your income change, 2,500 minus 2,000 divided by 2,500 plus 2,000, which is 4,500. Okay. 100 divided by 2,100, 500 divided by 4,500 equals 0.047 divided by 0.111, and you should get an answer of 0.43. Okay, so that's for the arc elasticity, and that is obviously a positive answer. Okay, now remember, for income elasticity you can get a positive or negative answer. Because it's positive, you're dealing with a normal product. Okay, now you have to solve your arc elasticity for brown bread as well. But now, obviously, your change in income for all of these examples will be exactly the same. So you don't have to recalculate that. You can just use the end result for your change in income. Okay? So for your brown bread, the income elasticity is equal to, so your income elasticity of brown bread, it says that when your income increases from 2,000 to 2,500, so for your denominator, you can just simply fill in the 0.111, and then you just solve for your change in consumption of your brown bread, which changed from 1,900, sorry, which changed from 2,000 right. And if you solve for that, you should get an answer of 0.0256 divided by 0.1 equals minus 0.23. Okay, so for your brown bread, income elasticity of brown bread, you should get an answer of minus 0.23. Okay. Then for the last one, for KFC, again, you can just use your quantity change. They said that when your income increased, your consumption of KFC increased from 300 to 500. So Q2 500 minus your 300, all divided by 800, which is your 500 plus your 300. Okay, 200 divided by 800, 2.25. Okay, So your income elasticity for KFC, 2.25, income elasticity for brown bread, minus 0.23, and income elasticity for white bread, 0.43. Okay. Then the next question says, classify each of these in terms of normal or inferior product. You know that a positive income elasticity is a normal good. Negative income elasticity is an inferior product. So the white bread and the KFC are both normal goods. And the brown bread is inferior. Okay. Positive answer, negative answer. Right. Then classify each of these into a necessity or luxury. So now for your necessity, your income elasticity is between 0 and 1. Okay? And as we saw, white bread 0.43, brown bread 0.23. So when you are looking at your luxury versus necessity products, you can ignore the plus or minus sign. Okay? It is only if it is between 0 and 1, it's a necessity product. So white bread and brown bread, necessity. And then obviously your KFC was above 1, so it's a luxury product. All right. Maybe put that category in there as well. Between 1 and infinity, luxury. Okay. And again, we're talking about the absolute value in that case, so you can ignore the plus or minus sign. Plus or minus sign is just to indicate the relationship between the variables. Right. You guys cool with that? Assume that a firm hires 20 laborers at a rate of 60 Rand per hour or day, whatever. Average product of the laborers is 3 units per day, and the last laborer adds 1 unit per day to the total product. The fixed cost of production is 360 Rand. What is the total production of the 20 laborers? Okay. Well, what they've told us here is that there are 20 laborers, and the average product of labor is 3 units. Okay. So to work back to your total product, you multiply your average product by the amount of laborers. So if there's 20 laborers and they're each producing 3 units, it means that your total output is 60 units. Okay. What is the total cost of producing the output as calculated in the question above? So remember, total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. They've already told us that our total fixed cost told us that our total fixed cost is 360. The only variable cost that we've got is the 20 laborers multiplied by their wage rate per day. Okay? So total fixed cost is 360 plus the 20 laborers times what they cost us per day, 60. And it would give us an answer of 1560 for your total cost of production. All right. Yeah. No, the last laborer that only produces 1 unit, we're not worried about him yet, because they've told us that the average product of labor is 3 units per day. So it doesn't really matter if one laborer produces 10 and one laborer produces only 1. We're interested in the average. Okay. We can still calculate the total from the average. Okay. Now, what is the average total cost if 60 units are produced? Okay. So what is average total cost? Average total cost is equal to total cost divided by quantity. We've already calculated our total cost, 1560, divided by, they're telling us what the quantity is, 60. So you should get an answer of 26 Rand. So it costs us 26 Rand to produce each unit of output. Okay. Right. What is the marginal cost of the 60th unit of output? So now this is where we are concerned about the last laborer only producing 1 unit of output. So we produced 60 units of output overall. And what the question said was that the last laborer only produced the last unit of output. Okay? Which means that that laborer was hired and he only produced us that 60th unit of output. Which means his entire wage rate went to producing only that 1 unit of output. Okay. So that's exactly what you say. What is the marginal cost of the 60th unit of output? Right. It was the one laborer that produced the last unit. So therefore, what did we pay that laborer to produce that last unit of output? 60 Rand per laborer per day. So it cost us 60 Rand. All right, what is the average cost of what is the average variable cost if 60 units are produced? Okay, so to calculate your average variable cost, it is equal to your total variable cost divided by quantity. Okay, so now we know that our total variable cost is the 20 laborers that we've hired multiplied by their price of labor, by their wage rate. Okay, so that is our total variable cost, and we need to divide it by the quantity that they produce for us. All 20 laborers produce 60 units of output for us. Okay, so the average variable cost is 20 times 60 divided by 60, which gives us 20 Rand. All right, and you can actually work your way backwards because we said that the total cost was total variable cost plus total fixed cost. And they told us that the total fixed cost was 360. Okay? So therefore the total variable cost, because we've already calculated the total cost, was 1560, which means that the total variable cost must be 1200, which is exactly what 20 times 60 equals. All right, so we can check our answer and we know that that is correct. Okay. Any questions? Describe the following concepts. A monopoly. All right, so a monopoly is when there is only one firm producing a product that it supplies to the entire economy. Okay? So exclusive supply of a product or service by one firm to the economy. All right. Now an oligopoly, so your best example of a monopoly, there's no true monopoly because even Eskom, being the only supplier of electricity in South Africa, there's still replacement products. So we can go solar panels or whatever the case is, we can still replace their product. Okay. So the best examples, even though they're not in theory perfect, would be Eskom, Transnet, whatever. The second one is your oligopoly market. Now your oligopoly market structure is when there is limited competition, small number of suppliers with intense competition between them. And remember, there are high barriers to entry. Now, this is when you need to remember all your assumptions of the different market structures. So oligopoly had high entry and exit barriers. Okay. The best example of your oligopoly market structure is your cell phone networks. Right. So Vodacom, MTN, Cell C, small number of very, very large firms that produce and sell the entire country's demand. Right, collusion. First thing you need to remember is collusion is only possible in oligopoly. Collusion is only possible in an oligopoly market structure. Now, what is collusion? Right, it's the agreement by firms on the price of products. So now collusion is when the firms get together and they decide on a selling price for that product, which is obviously illegal. Okay. Interdependence between firms. Basically, interdependence, you should know what that means. It's when you depend on somebody else or something else. So interdependence between firms occurs because of specialization. Okay. So economies that specialize in the production of a product in the production of products or services need to trade with one another. So what this means is if one economy produces all the products it needs, it wouldn't have to trade with another economy. It could be self-sufficient. Doesn't exist today. Obviously, all economies need to trade with other economies because we specialize in a product. We don't produce everything. So it's the same with firms. One firm doesn't produce every single product. All right? One firm produces a limited range of products, which means that it would have to trade with other firms. It would have to buy raw materials from somewhere else. It doesn't produce its own raw materials. So they all depend on each other. Okay, interdependence. Monopolistic competition. So remember, you've got two extremes. You've got firstly monopoly on the one side, and you've got perfect competition on the other. Okay? Monopolistic fits somewhere between, and it includes elements of both perfect competition and monopoly. All right. So, combines elements of monopoly and perfect competition. And again, go back to your assumptions of perfect competition and your assumptions of your monopoly. And you need to know which of those assumptions we use for monopolistic competition. Okay. You guys cool with that? All right, the next one, the table. Okay, you definitely have to know how to do these tables. You will be asked a table question in your exam. This is quite a a lot of work for 5 marks. So you can't really see it here, but this is total revenue. Total revenue. This is total cost, total profit, average revenue, average total costs, marginal revenue, marginal cost. Right. So you need to know how to calculate all of those variables. Right. So from 0 units of output, if you sell 0 units, you make 0 revenue, but your total cost is 50. It means that your total profit is negative 50. You are making a loss of 50. There's no average revenue, no marginal revenue, no marginal cost, and no average total cost. Yeah. All right. For the first unit of output, your total revenue is 300. Your total cost is 300, which means you make 0 profits. You break even. Okay. How do we calculate average revenue? Average revenue is total revenue over quantity. Okay. So what we're saying is 300 divided by 1, 300. Your average total cost is total cost divided by quantity, 300. Your marginal revenue, to calculate your marginal revenue, it's change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. But because your quantity increases by 1 unit each time, you can ignore your change in quantity. So it's just change in revenue. So we went from 0 revenue all the way to 300, which means that our marginal revenue is 300. Our marginal cost, on the other hand, it was 50. Then for the first unit, it was 300. So the marginal cost is 250. Marginal cost is change in total cost. And the change in total cost is 300 minus the 50. Okay. Yep. All right. Okay, then okay, so let's do our total profit column. Total profit is total revenue minus total cost. Okay? So 575 minus 525 gives us 50. 825 minus 725 equals 100. 1050 minus 900 gives us 150. 1250 minus 1050 gives us 200. That should be 200. $150. So then we start to make a loss from the 9th unit of output. Why? Because marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue. So each unit that we sell, we're losing money on. All right? Okay. And for the 10th unit of output, we are actually making a 300 Rand loss. So ideally, we should have stopped selling at 8 units of output. Right. Your average revenue, total revenue over quantity. So 575 divided by 2 gives us 287.50. 825 divided by 3 gives us 275. 1050 divided by 4 gives us 262.50. And then I'll just fill in the rest here. Right. Your average total cost is total cost divided by quantity. So you do the same thing there. In this case, you divide 525 by 2. 262.50. 24166. All right. This last one is 217 Rand 50 cents. Okay, now your marginal revenue, when you calculate your marginal revenue, it is your change in your total revenue. Okay. So, how much did marginal revenue increase between 1 and 2 units? It's the 575 minus the 300, 275. 825 minus 575. And for your marginal cost, it is the change in total cost. So, and you should get the following. All right, you guys cool with that? Okay. All right, question 3. Following table shows the marginal and total utilities that Thomas derives from the consumption of pizza during an all-you-can-eat lunch at the university's cafeteria. Use the information provided to answer the questions that follow. You've got your total utility, your marginal utility. Right, so number of pizza slices eaten, total utility gained from those pizzas. Okay. When you calculate your marginal utility, again, it is change in total. So from 0 to 40, the marginal utility for the first pizza was 40. From 40 to 72, it was 32. From 72 to 99, it was 27, 24, 18, 8, 0, and minus 7. Okay. So you need to remember that your marginal utility can be 0 and it can be a negative. Okay. All right. And when your marginal utility is negative, it actually decreases your total utility. All right. So Thomas should have stopped eating pizzas at the 6th slice. What is the additional utility from the consumption of the 4th pizza slice? It is 24. Additional utility from the consumption of the 6th, only 8 utils. And you can actually say utils. Now remember, utils are the measurement for utility or satisfaction. Okay. What happens to the total utility as Thomas eats more and more pizza? Total utility increases at a decreasing rate. Then it hits 0 and starts to decrease. What happens to the marginal utility as he eats more and more pizza? Marginal utility diminishes. Where have you seen that before? The law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay. You need to know your definitions as well. Okay. Right, question 5. Describe the difference between the Cournot and Stackelberg models. Right, so for your Cournot model, okay, both firms make their output decisions simultaneously. All right, they both make their output decisions at the same time, and they assume that the output set by the other firm is already fixed. Okay. Whereas in the Stackelberg model, one firm sets its output decision first. Right, so that is from, I think, Unit 12 of your study notes. Unit 12 is just purely theory. It will be like short questions. So your Stackelberg model, Cournot model, your Bertrand model, your first mover advantage, your kinked demand curve. You need to know all of that stuff. All right. Two firms operating in the same market must choose between a collusion price and a cut price. Firm A's profit is listed before the comma. So there's firm A in blue. Firm B's profit after the comma. If each firm tries to choose a price that is best for it, regardless of what the other firm does, which action would A and B choose? Okay. Now, let's assume that we start at this position over here. So both of the firms are colluding with each other, A and B. They're both earning 24 Rand profit or whatever. Okay? Now, if firm A cuts the price and firm B continues to use the collude price, we will move up into this quadrant. Okay? So we're going to do it from firm A's point of view first. Now, firm A is earning 24 Rand here, but if they cut the price, suddenly they move from 24 to 30 Rand. So what's better for them, 24 Rand or 30 Rand? 30 Rand. So what they're going to do is they're going to cut the price. Okay. If, on the other hand, firm A was colluding and firm B was cutting the price, so firm B was earning 30 Rand and firm A was earning 6 Rand, if firm A cuts the price and they move up here, they're going to earn 18 Rand instead of the 6 Rand. Does that make sense? So 30 Rand is better than 24 Rand and 18 Rand is better than 6 Rand. So regardless of what B is doing, whether B is colluding with A or whether they are not, whether they cut the price or not, it doesn't make a difference to A. It's always in firm A's best interests to cut the price because they're going to always earn more money. Okay. Now, the same goes for firm B. Obviously, you can see the pattern is the same with the returns there. So regardless of firm A's strategy, whether they are cutting the price or not, firm B would earn more money if they cut the price. So if we start again at the original block, 24 and 24 over here, if firm B cuts its price, we're going to move into that block where it earns 30 Rand, which is better than 24 Rand. Okay. And if we start at this block over here, where firm A is already cutting the price, firm B is earning 6 Rand, they should also cut the price because they will start earning 18 Rand instead of the 6 Rand. 18 is better than 6, 30 is better than 24. It is always in firm B's best interests to cut the price. So for both of these firms, it's always in their best interests to cut the price regardless of what the other firm is doing. Okay. Right, so I don't have a set answer. You can just come up with your own answer for that, but you need to include that information that I've just told you. Okay. Explain how it's always better for them to cut the price, regardless of what the other firm does. Okay? So both firms choose cut price, regardless of what the other firm is doing. Yeah, you should probably include a little bit more detail for the 6 marks. Yeah, I've got a model answer in the notes. Check in your notes. All right. Okay, so, sorry, question 2, what did you say? For 7 units of output. Hey? Oh, is this supposed to be 175? 175. Okay. So then, yeah, as you said, because your marginal cost is equal to your marginal revenue here, this would be your profit maximizing output, 6 units. Okay. Cool. All right, so you guys cool with game theory and everything? All right, your multiple choice. Okay, question 1. Which of the following statements about the market demand curve for a product is false? It would be number 3. Market demand curve may shift if there is a change in the price. No, if there is a change in the price, you move along the curve. You do not shift the curve. Okay. Question 2. All right, so this question I had absolutely no idea, but if I had to hazard a guess, I would say question 3. Okay, but there's a huge question mark next to that one. Question 3. If the supply equation is given as the following, price elasticity of supply between 30 and 60 units using the arc elasticity method is calculated as what? Okay, so what you would have to do is you would have to substitute those different prices into that equation to get your different quantities, Q1 and Q2, and then you would substitute it in to solve using your arc elasticity formula. All right? So QS is equal to minus 300 plus 15P. Now P1 is 30. P2 is 60. So you get a quantity of 150. Right, for your second price, right. So Q2 is equal to 600, P1 is equal to 150, P1 30, P2 60. Substitute them into your arc elasticity. So Q2 was 600 minus Q1, which was 150, divided by 750. Both of them together. P2 was 60 minus 30, all divided by 90. Should give you the following, 1,8. Right. And you know it should be a positive answer. Why? Because you're calculating the price elasticity of supply. And you know that the supply curve has a positive slope, which means you get a positive answer, 1.8. Okay. If a consumer in Ghana is always indifferent to 1 additional unit of cocoa beans or 2 additional units of oil palm, the oil palms are on the horizontal axis, then the indifference curves will be, all right. So is indifference between 1 additional unit of beans or 1 additional unit of oil palms. Okay? And they say he's always indifferent, which means that the marginal rate of substitution between these two products is constant. He always swaps 1 for 1. So therefore, your indifference curve will be a straight line. It will be downward sloping. It's always downward sloping because you decrease the consumption of one in order to increase the consumption of the other, which means that it has to be a negative answer, and it would be negative, 2 additional units of oil palms. Okay, so it will be minus a half. All right. It doesn't really matter how many he's swapping. What is important is that the ratio remains the same. So it's always 2 for 1. Okay. Right, number 5. In the following cases, in which of the following cases would the income and substitution effects for books have the same sign? So remember, your income and substitution effects move in the same direction or work in the same direction for normal products. For inferior products, they work against each other or work in the opposite direction. So when books are normal goods and the price of books increases. Suppose Anna has 5 Rand pocket money to spend on cookies and rusks. Both cookies and rusks cost 1 Rand each. The following table represents the total utilities that she gets from those products. So now remember, when we're looking at the marginal utility or total utility, in order to maximize your total utility, you have to spend your income in such a way that you maximize the per Rand value utility for every 1 Rand spent. Okay. So for this table, what you would actually have to do is calculate the marginal utilities for these products. Okay? And remember, marginal utility, change in total. So for the first unit, it's pretty easy. It increased from 0 to 10, so it's 10. Then from 10 to 18, so it's 8. From 18 to 24 is 6. From 24 to 28 is 4. That is the marginal utility. The marginal utility of rusks, for the first unit 14, second unit 10, third unit 8, and fourth unit 6. Now both of these products cost 1 Rand each. Okay? So if you were going to spend 1 Rand on a cookie and 1 Rand on a rusk, which one would you buy first? You get 10 utils from the cookie and you get 14 utils from the rusk. The rusk, exactly. You get more utils for every 1 Rand that you spend. Okay, so you're going to spend 1 Rand on rusks. For your second purchasing decision, you would be indifferent between the two because they both earn you 10 utility or utils. So you can buy either a rusk, doesn't matter. For your third purchasing decision, now you're going to go back and buy a cookie because that gives you 10 utils as opposed to only 8 utils. Right? Then for your fourth decision, again, you are indifferent between rusks and cookies because they give you the same. So you buy whatever. And then for your fifth purchasing decision, we'll go back to rusks. Okay, so now you've spent all 5 Rand and you've maximized your possible utility. Okay. So then your answer would be 2 cookies and 3 rusks. All right, number 7. Consumer finds that for product A, the price is 5 Rand and the consumer's marginal utility is 100 utils. While product B, the price is 10 Rand and the marginal utility is 160 utils. Which of the following statements is true? So firstly, what you need to do, in equilibrium, your marginal utility of A over the price of A needs to equal the marginal utility of B over the price of B. So, for product A, they said that the price is 5 Rand, marginal utility is 100. So 100 divided by 5 gives us 20. For product B, marginal utility was 160 over the price, which was 10, which equals 16. And you can see there that these two do not equal each other. So this consumer is not in equilibrium. It means that for every 1 Rand that they spend on product A, they are getting 20 additional utils. And for every 1 Rand that they spend on product B, they are getting 16 additional utils. So which one would you rather purchase? You would rather purchase more of product A and less of product B. So you would divert income or expenditure from product B towards product A. All right. Question 8, isoquants that are downward sloping straight lines exhibit constant marginal rate of technical substitution. Mr. Messi's income consumption curve is the following. His budget constraint is the following. How much quantity can he consume to maximize his utility? Now what's important here is they've told us that QA and QB are equal to each other. Okay? So that's exactly what you can do in your equation. You can see 160, because the two quantities are equal, you can say 160 is equal to, and then solve for Q, and you should get an answer of 32. Wow. Number 10, if the consumer's marginal rate of substitution equals 2 cheeseburgers for 1 Hawaiian pizza, it means that the consumer's indifference curve must be convex with respect to the origin to the graph. Okay? Indifference curves are not positively sloped, they're always negatively sloped. Okay? The ratio of marginal utility of 1 cheeseburger to that of 1 Hawaiian pizza must be equal to half. It is only at that point, but it's not for the entire indifference curve. Okay? Remember, your marginal rate of substitution differs for every single point along your indifference curve. Okay. And how do we measure it? With a tangent to the indifference curve. Number 4, all of the above also cannot be true. Right, question 11. At the output level Q, what is the total variable cost? So we are producing at output Q over here. What is the total variable cost? To calculate the variable cost, it is up to that point over there where we intersect the variable cost curve. Then what you need to do is you need to go across, because essentially this is only the variable cost for this 1 unit of output, but you need to calculate your variable cost for all the units of output because you're calculating your total variable cost. Okay. So if this quantity is actually 10, you need to calculate 10 times if your cost is 5. 10 times 5 gives you 50. So what I'm saying is you need to calculate this entire area to calculate your total variable cost. And that entire area is 0, B, E, Q. So it would be number 1. Right. Question 12. Refer to the above diagram. To maximize profit or to minimize losses, this firm will produce what? To maximize profit, you need to produce where your MC curve intersects your MR curve. So you will produce at point H, which corresponds to, I don't know what that corresponds to. Let's just say it corresponds to E. E units produced at a price of A. All right. Number 13, a firm's average fixed cost is 20 Rand if it produces 6 units of output. If it produces 4 units, its average fixed cost will be what? Okay, so your total fixed cost is equal to average fixed cost times quantity. So they've told us that the average fixed cost is 20 times 6 units of output. So our total fixed cost would be 120. Okay? Now they want us to calculate our average fixed cost for 4 units. So average fixed cost is equal to total fixed cost divided by quantity. 120 divided by 4, 30. Remember, your total fixed cost does not change. Okay. Your average fixed cost changes by the amount of units that you divide it by. Okay. All right, question 14. I have no idea what they are talking about here. An increase in men's wages will most likely cause, what I think it is number 2. But again, that is a big question mark. Does anyone have any other suggestions? Okay, if any of you do get hold of the answer for this question, please let me know. The shutdown decision can be stated in terms of producer surplus by saying that a firm should produce in the short run as long as the producer surplus is positive. As long as you are producing a product and selling it for more than it costs you to produce that product. Okay. Remember, producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the market price. But we said that the supply curve was the marginal cost. Okay. Marginal cost by the supply curve, and the market price was the marginal revenue. So you would not produce and sell a product if the marginal cost was above the marginal revenue. Okay, does that make sense? Which means that your producer surplus needs to be positive, your marginal cost needs to be below your marginal revenue. You guys cool with that? Okay. When a buyer's willingness to pay for a good is equal to the price of the product, what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the additional amount of money that you would be willing to pay for a product, but you obviously don't have to pay for it. So if I'm willing to pay 2,000 Rand for a product and I only pay 1,000 Rand, my consumer surplus is 2,000 minus 1,000, it is the 1,000 Rand. But when my willingness to pay for a product is equal to the price of the product, I get 0 consumer surplus out of it. So I will be indifferent between buying the good and not buying it. Okay. Suppose that the first 4 units of a variable input generate total outputs of 100, 250, 350, and 400 respectively. What is the marginal product of the third unit of output? So the marginal product of the third unit is the 350 minus the 250 equals 100. We are saying that what amount does the third unit generate? So our total increases from 250 to 350, which means that the third unit added 100. Okay. Number 18, Joshua experiences grief that he receives less additional units from each additional Apple MacBook that he buys. Being an economist, he estimates that the total utility he receives from 1, 2, and 3 MacBooks are 15, 27, and 36,000 respectively. If the price of the MacBook is 15 grand, What is the marginal utility for every rand spent on the second MacBook? So now you've got to calculate the marginal utility from the second MacBook, which means you need to take the total utility for both MacBooks, 27,000. You need to minus what he got off the first one, which means that when he bought the second MacBook, he got 12,000 utils. But that MacBook cost him 15,000 Rand, which means that he only got 0.8 utils for every 1 Rand that he spent on that MacBook. Okay. Number 19. In which of the following market structures is there a clear-cut mutual interdependence with respect to price output policies? Right, so the market structure with the most intense competition and the market structure where companies would react or would have to react to output and pricing decisions of other companies would be the oligopoly market structure. Okay. All right, question 20. Which of the following industries most closely approximates pure competition? Now, pure competition or perfect competition, one of the assumptions is a homogeneous product. Okay. Now, the only homogeneous product you can see there would be steel. Okay. So that would be, I think, the closest one. I don't really know what farm implements are. Agriculture. No, you've got a few firms supplying the entire market, a few farmers supplying the entire market. Or maybe you're correct, actually. I don't know. It would depend how many producers. It's not really a clever question. Just think of your assumptions. So many buyers, many sellers. Okay, so maybe you're right, actually, because more people would buy agriculture. Everybody needs to eat. Probably got more farmers than you do steel manufacturers. But the product is not really homogeneous, because even though it might look the same, homogeneous means identical in every single way. Okay. So yeah, not really a good question. Yeah, I would say either agriculture or steel, depending on which assumptions you go with. Okay. 21, a purely competitive seller. Remember, in perfect competition, buyers and sellers are price takers. The forces of supply and demand settle on the price of the product, and then the producers and consumers have to accept that price. Okay. 22, a firm's current output level is 300 units per week. It has 10 employees at a weekly wage of $700 each. Raw materials which are ordered and delivered daily cost 2,000 Rand. The weekly cost of the firm's capital is 2250. Calculate the following. Okay, so what is your total variable cost? In this case, you've got two things that would make up your variable cost. What is variable cost? Cost that varies with quantity of output. So if you increase your output, you will have to employ more workers. Okay? So there, the workers increase with quantity of output. The other thing, inputs. Okay, raw materials which are ordered and delivered daily cost 2,000 Rand a week. The more units you sell, the more raw materials you have to buy. Okay, so both of those costs together would make up your total variable cost. So 10 employees at a weekly wage of 700 Rand, 10 times 700 gives you 7,000 plus the 2,000 for your raw materials. Okay, so in this case, the answer is pretty easy because you can see the only total variable cost that is 9,000 is option 2. But if you had to go further, total fixed cost, 2250. Remember, your firm's capital, which is fixed, is equal to 2250. And then the last one, total cost, 11,250. When you add 9,000 and 2250, you get 11,250 for your total cost. Okay. So option 2. Which one of the following statements about the firm's average cost curves is false? I believe it's 1. Short run average cost curve will be constant if the price of an input is fixed in the short run. the price of an input that is fixed in the short run increases, that would be false. Okay. 24, suppose that the price of labor is 15 Rand and the price of capital is 45 Rand. What is the equation of the ISO cost line corresponding to the total cost of 115? How do we calculate your total cost of production? If you've got 10 laborers at a wage rate of 10 Rand each, it means that your total cost for laborers is 10 times 10, it's 100. If at the same time you've got one machine that costs you 50 Rand, 1 times 50 is 50, so your total cost is the amount that you're spending on labor plus the amount that you're spending on capital. Okay, so the equation here is 115 total cost, but it's made up of 15 Rand for every laborer that you have and 45 Rand for every piece of capital that you have. All right. If an entrepreneur is minimizing the cost for a given output level and the marginal product of labor is 15, the marginal product of capital is 45, price of capital is 900, what is the price of labor? So, if the entrepreneur is minimizing the cost, if you're minimizing the cost of production, it means that you've equated the marginal productivity of labor over the price of labor to the marginal productivity of capital over the price of capital. Because if any one of these were greater than the other, you would spend more money on that input. Okay. So it tells us that the marginal productivity of capital is 45 and the price of capital is 900. So if we had to calculate that, 45 divided by 900 is 0.05. Okay. Now, obviously, they haven't given us the price of labor. They're asking us to calculate it, but they told us that the marginal productivity of labor is 15 divided by the price of labor needs to equal the same 0.05. Why? Because they've told us that the entrepreneur has minimized the cost. So you need to swap these terms around. It means that the price of labor is equal to 15 divided by 0.05, which means that the price of labor is 300. All right. Question 26, I cannot work out. I don't think any of these options are correct. So this is a payoff matrix, but the payoff is slightly different for both of these parties. Okay? So again, to answer this question, you need to start in one random block. I always just start in that one. The payoff for player 2 is in green, and the payoff for player 1 is in blue. All right, now, if you start at this point over here, where both of them are earning 2, and they are both picking option B, okay? Let's start with player 2. If player 2 decides to pick, no, sorry, let's start with player 1, okay? So we're sitting in this quadrant here. Wait, hang on. Okay, wait, so instead of starting at the bottom over here, we're going to start over here. So that's what they're currently both earning, 3 and 5 respectively. So now player 1 is earning 3, but if player 1 picks B, suddenly he's going to earn 4. So it's his dominant strategy to pick B. Okay? If they had started over here, again, player 1 would earn 2 instead of 1, which is obviously greater. So for player 1, his dominant strategy is B. Okay? For player 2, on the other hand, if we start in this part over here, player 2, if he decides to pick A, he will decrease, so he wouldn't pick A. All right? If, on the other hand, we started up here, player 2 would decide to pick A, because 3 is better than 1. Okay. If we start down here, with player 2 picking A and player 1 picking B, then it's better for player 2 to pick B. So then we go back to this one over here. So what I'm trying to say is that there is only a dominant strategy for player 1. I cannot work out the dominant strategy for player 2. Right, if I had to pick one, I would say that, option 3. But again, I'm not sure about that one. If you do have an answer, let me know. Okay, so you're selling your penthouse. After you've got your degree, you've got a lack of job, and you've got a penthouse worth 2.8 million. Okay? Decide that you would take no less than 2.8, but after some negotiation, you sell it for 2.805. Now, what is producer surplus? It is when you sell a product for more than what you were willing to sell it for. So you were willing to sell your penthouse for 2.8 million. You actually sell it for 2.805, which means that the 5,000 is your producer surplus. Okay. In a Cournot model, one characteristic of equilibrium position is that the output is less than the single price monopoly would be if only one firm were in the market. 29. A weakness of the Stackelberg model is that one firm behaves strategically while the other behaves naively. And finally, the kinked demand curve model of oligopoly assumes that the elasticity of demand in response to a price increase is more elastic than the elasticity of the demand in response to a price decrease. Okay, remember your kinked demand curve model looks something like that. At the market price, it becomes more elastic, it becomes flatter, but below that, it becomes steeper, it becomes less elastic. Okay.